Hey there. Now, most people think retirement budget fails because you estimate the wrong numbers. As an early retiree, I think a retirement budget fails for these reasons: assuming retirement spending is going to behave, assuming every month will look about the same, assuming every spending category will stay in its lane, and assuming you'll spend exactly what you plan to spend and when you plan to spend it. And you know what they say about assuming things. And after retiring at 55 in December of 2024, and I'm now in my second year of retirement, I can tell you this with certainty: retirement spending does not always behave like you expected. But here's the good news: that doesn't mean your budget is useless. In fact, my retirement budget has worked pretty well. Not because I predicted everything perfectly, I absolutely did not, but because I built my budget expecting real life to show up and mess with it. And that is the part I think people planning what their retirement budget might look like miss. So, in this video, I'm going to share the 7 retirement budget rules that have actually worked for me since retiring at 55. And no, I'm not going to share my exact budget numbers because that's personal. And also because I have friends and family that watch this channel, and I don't need Uncle whoever or friends or you even judging what I'm spending on my different budget line items. And my actual numbers aren't the point. The principles I'm about to share are the point and what are important. And because whether your budget is bigger than mine, smaller than mine, or completely different from mine, doesn't matter, as these are the rules that have made my retirement budget feel realistic, flexible, and livable, and I think will benefit you to hear too. And the last one may be the most important because even when the math works, your brain may still need time to believe it. Okay, rule number one: build your retirement budget from your real life, not your fantasy life. Before I retired, I already knew what we spent each month. This is because for many years up to and leading to retirement, I had a household budget for spending by category. So I already had a very good idea of what our life actually cost. And this helped and mattered a lot because when you're planning for retirement, it is very easy to create a fantasy version of yourself. Fantasy retired you travels exactly the right amount, never impulse buys anything, never has a broken appliance, unexpected medical bill, never pays for something dumb, and lives in a house where nothing leaks, breaks, clogs, cracks, or makes a suspicious noise at 2 in the morning. Well, that person does not exist. At least not in my house. So I did not start with some generic rule that says retirees spend 70 or 80% of what they used to spend. I started with what we actually spent before retirement because our lifestyle didn't change that much when I retired. We still live in the same house, we still have the same basic habits, we still cook at home a lot, we still spend money on the things we care about and avoid spending on things we don't. The fact that I was already tracking our spending was a big advantage because my retirement budget was not built from guesses. It was built from years of knowing what our life already cost. And that is my first rule. Before you retire, don't just ask, how much will retirement cost? Ask, what does my life already cost and what will actually change? That one shift makes the budget much more useful. Rule number two: separate what stays the same from what obviously changes. For us, most of our lifestyle stayed pretty similar after I retired. But 3 things clearly changed: health insurance, travel, and my gardening expenses all went up. Health insurance is a big one for anyone retiring before Medicare like me. When you leave work before 65, you don't just lose a paycheck, you also lose employer health insurance. That is not a small detail. That is a major line item and can be a major expense. The good news is you do not have to guess blindly. For example, if you plan to be on an ACA health insurance plan, you can go to healthcare.gov and get a pretty good estimate of what coverage may cost depending on your situation, your income, your age, your household size, and where you live. You also need to think beyond the premium because there's deductibles, out-of-pocket costs, prescription costs, all the fun of American healthcare. So for me, health insurance was not a surprise category. I knew it would be expensive, but I planned for it. Travel was also something I knew would increase. That is part of the point of retiring early for us. We want to do more while we still have the energy, health, and desire to do it. I retired in December of 2024, and right after the holidays, we took a 7 night Caribbean cruise to celebrate at the beginning of January. This year, we've already made a fun trip to New York City. We're visiting family in Wisconsin later this month, and this fall, for our 25th wedding anniversary, we're planning an even bigger trip. A few days in Athens, then a cruise with stops in Montenegro, Corfu, Sicily, Naples, the Amalfi Coast, and Pompeii, ending in Barcelona, where we'll stay a few more days before coming home. This is all part of the retirement we plan for, and my gardening also increased a lot. It's basically tripled in size, which sounds innocent until you realize that soil, fertilizer, the automatic irrigation system I set up, all of that costs money. Containers cost money and so forth. But gardening brings me a lot of joy in retirement. So I included all of this in my retirement budget. I see it as money doing what it's supposed to do. And that's what this second rule is all about. Don't assume retirement spending will automatically be lower. It really hasn't for us compared to what it was before I retired. Some things are gonna go down, but some things will go up. The trick is knowing which categories are actually going to change. Rule number 3, you need to budget for joy on purpose. This one matters a lot more than I expected. A retirement budget should not just be about all the expenses you normally have, like insurance, repairs, property tax, groceries, utility bills, and so forth. It also needs to include the things that make retirement worth retiring for. For us, that includes travel, like I just mentioned, my gardening, and spending time with family. It also includes some choices that may not be perfectly optimized on paper. For example, we lease a car in retirement. Financially, I know there are arguments against that. I understand the math. But we also enjoy having a newer vehicle, and that matters to us. Some people would never spend money that way, and that's fine. My aunt kept the same car for 20 years in retirement and just maintained it really well. The point is not that everyone should make the same choices that I make. The point is that your retirement budget should reflect what you actually value and enjoy. If you build a retirement budget that technically works but removes all the things you were looking forward to, I don't think that's a successful retirement budget. A good budget should have a plan for spending money on things that you enjoy and not have any guilt about spending that money. That may be travel, hobbies, your grandkids, a new bike, a workshop, music lessons, whatever. Because expenses that bring joy to retirement is very important, and you deserve to have enjoyment, of course, in retirement after saving for decades for this phase of life. Rule number 4, expect the ugly surprise expense. This is the part where I did not get everything perfect. Last year, my first year of retirement, our upstairs AC went out and we had to replace the entire condenser unit outside and the coil. That was not exactly on my retirement vision board. Nobody retires and says, you know what would really make this first year special? A large, unexpected AC expense. There was. And yes, that category went over budget, but the overall budget still worked. Why? Because retirement spending is flexible. That same year, we did not travel as much as I had originally planned. So even though home repairs were higher than expected, another category came in lower. The important point here is that a budget category going over does not automatically mean the whole plan failed. It just means real life happened. And then you adjust. For this year, I've updated my budget to better account for unexpected home repairs because our house is around 20 years old, and I'm sure there will be other repairs that surprise me. It's just retirement and just real life. Things break, things wear out, things need maintenance, and your house doesn't care that you've retired. So my fourth rule is simple. Build room in the budget for the ugly surprise expenses. Not because you know exactly what will happen, but because you know something will. Rule number 5, use flexibility as a retirement superpower. This may be the biggest reason my budget has worked. Not because every category is perfect, not because every month is perfect, but because I do not treat one expensive month, like the whole budget is doomed. If we overspend in one category, I look at it, I ask why it happened, and then we adjust. Sometimes that means being more careful in that category the next month. Sometimes it means another category naturally comes in lower. Sometimes it just means accepting that the annual budget matters more than any single month. That's one of the reasons I think retirement planning can look scarier than it really is. A spreadsheet assumes you spend in a straight line, but human beings do not spend in a straight line, as well. Life doesn't work that way either. You may spend more one month because of travel, less the next month because you're home. More one month because of repair, less the next month because you cook at home more. More one year because of a big trip, less another year because you stay closer to home. Retirement spending is bumpy, and that's okay. This is also where I think people don't give themselves enough credit. Most of us are more flexible than we realize. If markets are down, you may naturally pull back a little. If a big house expense hits, you may delay another expense. If travel gets expensive, you may take a different kind of trip. So, rule number 5 is this: don't panic when one category goes over budget. Pay attention, adjust, and keep the big picture in view. Rule number 6: you need a solid cash runway to support your budget. For me, having a solid cash runway is one of the biggest sources of peace of mind in my retirement. One of my biggest concerns in early retirement is not just whether the market goes down. The market will go down. That is just part of investing. The bigger concern is being forced to sell investments during a bad market because I need cash for spending. That is where a sequence of returns risk can hurt early retirees. So I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to sell investments in a market downturn to cover my expenses. So for me, having a solid cash runway means I do not have to react emotionally at all when the stock market drops. I can ignore a lot of that noise because the money I need for my normal planned and budgeted for retirement spending is not dependent on selling investments at the absolute wrong time. Beyond cash, I also moved a meaningful portion of my portfolio into more conservative assets for stability, but I still have plenty in foundational and growth investments too, because the money I should not need for a long time still needs the opportunity to grow. Rule number 7: check the budget often enough to trust it. I check my budget monthly. At the beginning of each month, I look at how we did the previous month. If we overspend in one category, I pay attention to it. If something is trending higher than expected, I adjust the following month. If something was a one time expense, I don't overreact. Now, I realize that may sound too detailed for some people. Some people might prefer reviewing their budget quarterly, and that's fine. Monthly is just the way I like to do it because it lets me stay on top of things better and adjust faster. And I also have a very type A personality, so I'm sure that's part of it too. Anyway, having detailed budgeting in place even before I retired was a big benefit because the habit was already built. I did not wait until retirement to suddenly become a budget person. And the monthly budget check that I do does something important for me. It keeps small issues from becoming the big issues. If one category is high, I know it. If another category is low, I know it. If the annual plan is still fine, I know that too. That knowledge gives me confidence and helps me to adjust as needed month to month to stay on track. And confidence is a bigger part of retirement spending than I expected because here's something I learned after retiring. Even if the math works, it can still take time to feel comfortable spending from the pile you spent decades building. For years, your job is to save, invest, accumulate, and not touch that pile. Then one day, retirement arrives, and suddenly the thing you trained yourself not to touch becomes the thing that funds your life. That is a strange and a big mental shift. For me, it took at least a year to feel more comfortable spending in retirement, and now in my second year, I'm still getting used to it, but I'm much better than the first year. Not because the budget or math was failing, but because going from saving to spending is a big psychological change. And I think a lot of retirees experience and struggle with this. So the seventh rule is not just to track your budget, it's to let your budget prove itself to you month by month, year by year. You start to see that one expensive month does not destroy the plan. You start to see that some categories go up and others go down. You start to see that spending on travel or a hobby or really anything that you enjoy You are not being reckless with your money, nor should you feel guilty if it was all planned. And you learn to trust your budget plans and the related spending. I know all of this is a little dry and boring, but boring is underrated and it's what we want in retirement planning. So, those are the 7 budget rules that have actually worked for me since retiring at 55. Build it from your real life, know what will actually change, budget for joy on purpose, expect ugly surprise expenses, be flexible, have a solid cash runway, and check the budget often enough to trust it and to adjust accordingly. The biggest takeaway is this: a retirement budget does not need to predict everything perfectly. It just needs to account for real life. Because real retirement is not a smooth line. Some months are expensive, some months are more quiet, some years you travel more, some years you have unexpected expensive house repairs. Some expenses will fade away, but if your budget has room for flexibility, if you know what matters to you, and if you have a plan for where the money is coming from, retirement spending becomes a lot less scary. And maybe that is the real goal, not to create the perfect budget, but to create a budget that lets you live the retirement you actually wanted without feeling guilty or worrying about it. Because the point of retirement is to use the money you save to build a life you are glad to wake up to. And if your budget helps you do that, then it is doing its job. Also, a quick note: I'd like to invite you to consider joining my Patreon. You can join for free, and I have a lot of free tools for you to use. Things like my ACA Magi Estimator, Retirement Readiness Scorecard, Cash Runway Worksheet, 10 Ways to Lower Your ACA Premiums ebook, Treasury and CD ladder guides, quarterly retirement review worksheet, and more. I made these resources free because I want them to help as many people as possible. And if you'd like to go a step further, the paid Roadmap member tier is now just $5 a month, and that gives you early access to my new podcast episodes, all of my podcast episodes ad-free, and access to the private Roadmap member community discussion space where paid members can ask questions, share experiences, compare notes, and communicate with others who are thinking seriously about retirement. I'll participate regularly, but my goal is to build a real community, not just make it about me. You can join my Patreon for free or become a Roadmap member by using the link in the description or using the QR code on your screen. And go to mikeupland.com for all of my media. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care and make the most of today.